So I've had my cases in the oven for well over an hour at about 200 degrees. Had my crank in the freezer for like 2 days. I oiled it up really good after I put the bearings on it, and I threw it in the freezer for about 2 days. So what I'm thinking is I need some different gloves. Alright, so my cases are good and hot. As you'll notice on the crank, you got a C-clip groove right there. That's for your variator side, which is the side you're going to put on second. You want to put that one on second. You want to actually put on your stator side first. That thing fell in there like you wouldn't believe. Just dropped in there. Now I'm going to take my homemade gasket that I prepared a couple days ahead of time, and I put it in a piece of wax paper surrounded by 2-stroke oil. Let this gasket get nice and saturated with oil. What I'll do is I'll place this gasket on my Carter half. I cut this gasket out of a piece of butcher paper as instructed, and boy, after you lube it up with oil, it flexes really nice, lays down nice and flat. You don't get wow, that's nice. It didn't fit like that when I first made it. So now I'm going to take the other case half. I'm going to set it right on top of there. This would be the variator side. And I am almost 100% stuck together. But at this point, I'm going to throw some bolts in here just to index a few things. I'm just randomly putting bolts in here. I know these two go on the top. This one goes up top. You don't want to tighten them all down. You want to leave them all loose. You don't want to tighten any of them down before you get them all in. Some of them take, the top two have threads and the rest of them have nuts and bolts, but you generally want to take and install your bolts with the nuts facing away from the variator side. You want the nuts on the magneto side, the generator side, so in the future if you decide to upgrade to a different variator like a Doppler, from what I understand, then you don't have to worry about clearance on your bolts, because the thickness of the nut and the leftover thread wind up hitting the back side of the variator, the Doppler. So just as a good measure, install them the first time right. Take it as a good measure just to install the nuts on the generator side. Now I can tell my cases are really cooling down. I can feel them starting to cool. I'm just going to put a little bit of a snug on this Carter. This thing is about perfectly put together. Just the butt end of my little tiny hammer here. couple taps. Then I'm going to torque it down. Kind of trying to use a diagonal pattern. You see, I'm replacing this stock crank with an aftermarket crank. So this little thin shim, hopefully it's enough, but you know, I'm not really sure yet. I won't be sure till I test it, because when I took this case apart, it didn't have a gasket in it, and shit, I'm putting new bearings and a new crank in there, so all that spacing might be totally different now. We'll just have to find out. It's all a learning experience. I've never done this before. I hear things popping, so I think it's seating together. Maybe it ain't supposed to pop, but this one's snapping together quite nice. Alright, now that I've pretty much got all this stuff seated, I'm going to set my torque wrench to the maximum, which is 11 foot-pounds. I want to believe, or 11 inch-pounds, or 11 foot-pounds, which is I want to say 132 inch-pounds if you're converting it. I could be totally off on that, but I'm going to set my torque wrench for 100 and... I'm going to go 130.
But if you bought 5 panels, I'd probably give you a break. That's 1,500. What kind of break are we at? Like about 175 a panel? Maybe 200 a panel. Panel, that's $1,000. I'll tell you what, I'd feel comfortable would be probably about $800. These stuff is very valuable. Because it's not stacked up. These are large panels.
Go in the cross pattern here. Not used to working on my kitchen counter. torque them all down to specs or close to. And hopefully, with any luck, this thing will spin kind of free.
Are you ready for your lovely bead? I'm ready. This guy named Cease actually built this whole other antique town, and he lives in it.
Feels pretty good to me.
I know a lot of these small towns that guys create all around America. Send us the coordinates and we'll go from there. Okay, bye. Now, a lot of these guys, when they collect a lot of stuff, they want to try to put it back in its natural environment. So if they got an old gas station, they got some gas.
I mean, I want a tight fit.
So they create a post office. So
I don't want it super loose.
for a collector that's very serious.
Alright, as far as I know, I got it.
Hey, it's right here. Make a look. I see your CSR's 4 mailboxes. This looks pretty cool. It's real good. Got a bunch of signs.